Good afternoon, dear participants. Before moving forward with the session, I would like to thank you all for joining in the fourth day of the Faculty Development Program at SSIPMT Raipur. It is a great achievement for all of us for showing the same level of enthusiasm and an intent to gain knowledge as we had in the initial days of the program. Good afternoon, sir. We are very grateful to have you with us. So for today's session, we have Dr. Mukul Shrivastava sir with us. He is the professor at Vardhaman College of Engineering, Hyderabad. Also, Dean and Professor at Mechanical Engineering Department. With a master's degree in Industrial Maintenance and Tribology from IIT Delhi, Dr. Mukul sir completed his PhD in Computational Fluid Dynamics from IIT Bombay. With over 30 citations and 4 articles published in journals, Dr. Mukul sir holds a great command over the subject of computational fluid dynamics. I wish you a warm good afternoon, sir, and I request you to join the meeting, and the stage is all yours, sir.
Good afternoon. First of all, I welcome all the participants in this talk on FDP. And regarding, as Professor Vinayak told, that I have a very strong hold and command over CFD. Very strong are big words. CFD is a C. So I have do some knowledge in the area, which I will like to share with you. First of all, let me share the screen, and I would request that I will have to switch off the camera because I'll be writing on the same iPad. So because of that, so kindly excuse me for that. I'll switch off the camera and then I'll start with the sharing the screen and all. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Yeah, just a minute. I hope the PPT might be visible now.
Yes, sir, the presentation is clear.
Yeah. So I'll start. Good afternoon, all of you, participants and the coordinators and the organizing committee from Sri Shankaracharya College. First of all, I would like to thank the coordinators and management of the college for giving me this opportunity to share some of the things which I know. And personally speaking, it was a matter of great pleasure and honor for me because I have been from the same area, from Raipur, and way back I was associated with Shankaracharya College also. That at that time it was only Shankaracharya Bhilai, so I have been associated with it. So it was a personal feeling, and I felt nice going back to the region to which I belong. So let me start the talk. This is a talk on computational fluid dynamics. I am Dr. Mukul Shrivastava from Vardhaman College of Engineering. To start with, these are the outlines in which I'll be covering up today's talk. First of all, introduction. What is CFD? Where it is used? Followed by why it is used, how it is used, and what are the interpretations what we get out of the results and whatever we do in CFD. So talking of introduction, today's talk I have considered and assumed that I'll be giving an introduction of CFD. CFD is something in which there are a lot of myths, and some of us know about CFD, but I can call it it is into emerging area. There are many misnomers and certain myths also about CFD. So I will try to cover up these things. So the way I have designed today's talk, it is more for those people who are not aware of CFD rather than who know CFD, because it's an introductory talk. So talking of CFD, most of you might be knowing that it is computational fluid dynamics. Okay. So if we define it, it is a branch of fluid mechanics which uses numerical methods to solve and simulate fluid flow. Not necessarily fluid flow, it can be thermal analysis also. And the last line which I have written here, this is of more importance, which I would like to convey. Usually, the CFD, for those people who are not involved in the area, and even to many people who are involved in the area, the common concept is CFD is ANSYS, or if not ANSYS, some other software. ANSYS I am naming because of the reason that it is very popular software in the domain. Look, ANSYS is a, and even other softwares are great tools to study CFD. That I fully agree to it. Okay, but when we talk of CFD, CFD should not be considered that it is only ANSYS. Like you take some problem, you do some analysis, you get some colorful figures and just present it. Especially, I like since most of you are faculty, this has been a common observation of mine and even some of my colleagues that these days, especially students, in the name of CFD, what do they do is they take some model, do something in ANSYS, present some colorful figures, and present it as a their minor project or major project. But that is not something what CFD should be, or what we should understand from it. So that's my one key observation here, which I would like to bring into your attention. Talking about applications, I will focus on few applications. CFD, when you talk about, it's spread out, and wherever you can see around, it is application of CFD in most of the places. Like here, when we are seeing the animation of a flow across a car or flow across an aeroplane. Okay, the most common thing what we think is CD and CL. Okay, we want to increase CL here and we want to decrease CL here. We want to decrease CD, that is coefficient of drag and coefficient of lift, in all the cases. But in such cases, especially when it comes to the flying objects, these are not possible experimentally, because obviously because of the cost involved, you can't just hit and try each and every design. Moreover, there can be a logic that wind tunnels are there, we can do the experiments there, but even wind tunnels are a costly affair. Whereas if you talk about simulations, be it the code made by any person, or be it a professional software, these simulations are very easy to do. Apart from that, at any point of time, like if I want to see that what is the velocity of pressure here, or how is it happening here, or how is it happening near the spoiler, it is very easy and accessible if you talk in terms of a software or a simulation. Whereas if I want you to do same thing experimentally, and if I tell you that give me a pressure below this car at center at some point, then experimentally it might be very difficult. So these are just initial few examples. Furthermore, cycling. Uh, Many of us, and even I am counting myself in that case, that we see cyclists in cycling races and all. But very lately, I came to know that they are very intelligently making use of CFD in order to reduce their effect. What I came to know is generally the winner, who is the winner, he initially is at the backside. Like let us say these are the cyclists, then he might be somewhere here in the last position to make use of the flow effects. And only towards lately, when it is going, when the race is going to finish, they put in all their effort and they come to the first place. So there also they are using CFD, and of course in engines and all, you know, that flow across an engine. So there also you can do simulations and study a lot of things, and thereby optimizing the design of the engine. Heat exchanger might not be a new thing for most of you, but again, talking about heat exchanger, if you want to do it experimentally, every nook and corner, you can't have the findings or the values of velocity, pressure, or can see the effect. Recently, some of my colleagues are trying to do experimental studies on a corrugated plate heat exchanger. So for them, getting this shape corrugations inside a pipe, that becomes a challenge itself. And further to adding to that, if I want to change the corrugations, is if I want to change the shape, if I want to change the pitch, then experimentally it becomes almost next to impossible. Somehow, even if they are able to make these corrugations and all, then in that case studying the values at each and every internal point becomes a biggest challenge. So in such cases, simulations can be of very help, they're like very much useful and very much great help. Similarly, these things. This is something, the challenge which I faced when I started teaching what we call basic mechanical engineering, or the thermodynamics part. It was initially like when we study thermodynamics, most of the students know that in the name of thermodynamics, it is zeroth law, first law, second law, or let's say entropy. That's the end of it. But if we are able to show such simulations where in a, let's say, refrigerated space, the hot air which is red is going up and the blue which is cold vapors are, they are coming down, then it creates a lot of interest among the students. They are able to see the actual way it is happening, and we can do things like that. Till this point, whatever we saw was the more of orthodox or traditional things, what we know in terms of thermal engineering, thermodynamics, and maybe CFD. These are the two applications which are going on recently, and they are of very much use. Like this, here you can see that this is a mobile which is bending under the stress. So this was similar type of study was made in iPhone. There was some model, I don't know which model, but there was a study that in the pockets when they were keeping it, they, because of the stress, because of the force, the iPhone was bending, some of the models. So they did the analysis and they rectified that effect. Similarly, this is something which is a very emerging area these days, and because of the advancement of science day by day, we are going with the reduction in the size of, be it laptops, be it mobile, or whatever. But when we are going for the reduction of sizes of laptops and mobiles, the one major problem which we are facing is the intense heat which is getting generated and how to get rid of it. So even in that case, CFD comes for the rescue, and you can do all the simulations, see the effects, see the flow, how is it happening, and how the heat is going out. So this is one of the very emerging area. They call it either you can call it electronic cooling or you can call it electronic packaging, and this is a very like very useful, and considering the present aspects, if you talk of mechanical engineering, especially thermal, especially, this can be an area where we can get ourselves trained and also our students trained, so that they will be getting lot of potential jobs in the like coming times. These examples I've taken, first example is general the fluid flow through pipe. So how when the valve is opening, how the fluid is affecting. The second example which you're seeing here, and the actual geographical photo which you're seeing here, this is also very useful in these times. Recently, we are talking a lot of about smart cities. We are talking about green buildings and whatnot. So even in those cases, CFD can be a very good tool to use for in order to design how the flow is happening across the city, and even for a specific building also this can be used. Usually we apply Vastu and all in the structures and buildings, but even this can be of very helpful. One good my experience which I can narrate in this relevant to this is, if any one of you have been to IIT Delhi, then there's a the basic shape of IIT Delhi is like a C shape. Okay, so there's a one tunnel, small passage which connects computer building with the main building. So that tunnel is designed in such a way throughout the year, whatever be the weather, whatever may be the season, if you go and sit inside the tunnel, you will always feel a smooth breeze going on. So it's a very soothing experience. So that's also a sort of example of design of the building using the concept of fluid mechanics and CFD. And here, of course, you can see the planning of a smart city. Here they are in the left side, they are showing the animation, how the flow can happen in a smart city. And this is the photograph of the same city. Again, CFD is coming to the application and to the help of the doctors and in the biomedics. This is, I have shown a simulation of a heart. I have, I was lucky to attend one of the conferences in which Dr. Mukul from USA, he came. And in that, it was my learning experience. They were designing and coding the simulations in such a way that by listening to the heart of the sound, we can tell the amount of blockage which is existing in the heart. This is just the initial help of CFD. Second, on the second level, they were doing what they were doing was when the doctors are cutting, like suppose in this artery there's some blockage, and the doctors cut the blockage, okay, in certain shape like this or this. So in that case, these technical team, they were suggesting even the shape in which the blockage should be removed so that the blood flow causes less stress, less pressure over the heart. So this is something which maybe few years back we can't, like we could not have imagined even. But here they are coming to the help, and they are telling a lot of things about the functioning of heart. Even these days, when it comes to submarine or even underwater vehicles, UAVs are a very common concept these days to send UAVs to such places, like in case of especially in floods and all, we can send UAVs in such areas where the human lives it can be costly. So we can send UAVs. So even for those applications, CFD is coming to the help. And this slide, this is just a representation of sort of work which I did in my PhD. Nature is the best source of inspiration, be it the birds flying in the sky or be it fish swimming in the water. So taking the inspiration from the fish swimming, I had simulated this, what we call a school of fish, and these are representing the vorticity which are being shed at the downflow. And similarly, these are like three fishes swimming in side by side, and what are the vorticity and steam, velocity and pressure contours. These can be very helpful in order to understand the working or the flow of UAV, because we can learn a lot of things from fish, but we can't direct them that you have to flow like this, you have to undulate your tail at certain frequency. So even for that, learning from fish, their motion, we can simulate the same thing and see the effects. A very lovely example of this group type of swimming, or even you might have seen that when the birds fly, they fly in the similar structure. The advantage or the disadvantage is the leader, which is here at this point. This leader has to put in the maximum effort to fly or to swim, whereas these people who are at the later half, they are at relatively rest, they have to put in less efforts to do the same. So in fishes and even in birds, it has been observed that after some time this leader comes backwards and the other person comes forward. So it shows that this person, this fish or this bird puts maximum effort, then they come back to take relative rest, and the second person takes in the charge. So these type of observation we can validate from our simulation things. This is one important thing. This is just a buffalo and a flow across a buffalo. So the reason of keeping this simulation, when we were seeing these simulation, the reason is when we are doing simulation, in the name of simulation, it's not that we can do whatever we want to. This is the second myth. First myth was that CFD is ANSYS. No, ANSYS is a tool which can be used to study CFD, but ANSYS is not complete CFD. This was the first myth about CFD. Second thing which I have covered here is, in the name of CFD, you just can't simulate anything. Because if I'm simulating flow across a buffalo, it might be, okay, simulation is there, some flow is happening, velocity is there, but what is the use of this? There's hardly any use. So when we go for simulation or our students are going for simulation, we should take care what they are simulating. It should make sense. It should be of use. Otherwise, doing just in the name of CFD some simulation, I don't see any use of it. Then second thing is why CFD is needed. Okay, CFD is there. We are doing a lot of things, but there should be a reason. Why not use just fluid mechanics equation or thermal equations or the structural equations to do the analysis? Why are we need of CFD? So the answer is, for a fluid flow problem or even other problems, we need a complete solution in a complete flow field. By flow field means, let us say if I take an example of a room, and if I want to see temperature, or if the fan is running, then velocities at different points, if I want to know that, or even if I put a air conditioner here, and if I want to see the effect of airflow, temperature, and all these things, then I need a complete solution in this room, be it this point, be it this point, and be it this point. So for solving these type of things, what we need to solve is Navier-Stokes equation. In coming slide, I'll be showing you what a Navier-Stokes equation, but we need to solve Navier-Stokes equations. And analytical solution of Navier-Stokes equation is not possible because of certain complexities. So if we are not able to solve it analytically, it means we can't find a complete solution, continuous solution, to find all the values, let's say pressure, velocities, and whatever we want to. So if we are not able to find out, I'll come to that. These are the Navier-Stokes equation what I have represented here. I have taken it from certain website just to show it to you. So analytical solution of this Navier-Stokes equation is not possible. The day someone is able to find analytical solution for Navier-Stokes equation, that will be the day will not be needing these softwares, whatever softwares are there. So it's a very big challenge. I hope someday someone is able to find out the solution to it, analytical solution. But till that time, we'll be needing CFD, we'll be needing the numerical methods what we are using. So I've told you that we need certain continuous solutions, we need solution of CFD, we need solution of Navier-Stokes equation, and analytically it is not possible. So if it is not possible analytically, then what is the way out? So this is how a study of CFD or computational fluid dynamics is done. First of all, in order to solve those equations, Navier-Stokes equations, the numerical methods come to our rescue. All of us know at some point of time during our BTech, we might have studied sub course called numerical methods. I think in our university it is called as NACP, numerical methods for that. So when you talk of numerical methods, there are three different methods: finite difference, finite volume, finite element, which we can use in order to solve Navier-Stokes equations and get the solution. The major difference between finite difference, finite volume, and finite element is finite difference is solved at discrete points. Okay, we discretize the equation. I'm not going into much of technical details, assuming that this is just an introductory talk to give a taste of CFD rather than going into the too much of technicalities. So I'm assuming that and following the same thing in the explanation. So in finite difference, there are certain points where we solve the partial differential equation at these discrete points. Whereas in finite volume and finite element, we have certain control volumes over which we solve the equations. So these are the major difference between these three methods. Each of the methods have their own advantages and own disadvantages. So depending on the domain for which you are using CFD, each and every method has their own usage. Okay, so these are the numerical methods or techniques which you can use for studying of CFD. What's the procedure? Okay, we have a technique. Let's say we take finite difference or FEM, finite volume. These are known as FDM, finite difference, finite volume method, and finite element method, FEM, FEM, FDM. So let's say we pick a method and we start using it. So after picking up a method, what do we need to take care of? So this is the procedure. That first of all, the continuous domain, which we were talking about in the previous slide, is broken up into discrete domain using grids. There are different points like what we have in graph, different XY points. Similarly, we have a grid. These grids are of different shapes. I'll be coming to that. After having the grid, we need to have certain boundary conditions. I'll be coming to that also. Each of these points I'll be coming in later slides. After having the boundary conditions and domain and grid, we have the solution of discrete equations in a iterative fashion. We use certain iterative methods by which we get the solution. And during this, few things which we need to take care of is convergence, stability, turbulence modeling, grid independence, domain, time step. All these things will be seen soon. And after this, all these things are done. Once the CFD simulation is over, once the CFD is done, what you get is just numbers. Believe me, if I would have shown you, right now I am not able to present this here because it's a big file. But if I show you one simple result of any of my simulation, it will be just numbers, numbers, and numbers. Even if I tell you that this is x coordinate, this is y coordinate, this is pressure, this is x velocity, this is y velocity. If I tell you just by seeing those numbers, you can't analyze is a very big thing. You can't even understand what it is. You can't have a feel of it. So for that, we need the thing called post processing, where we do the plotting of the data so that it gives you a feel. All these previous animations, whatever I've shown you here, okay, maybe this or whatever these things, these are plotting, these are animations which are made from the data. So plotting of the data is very important. And after plotting, the another important thing is interpretation. If I show you just an animation with certain velocity, some value, it might be okay. You might feel okay, something is done, some colorful figure is there, some animation is there, but you might not be able to appreciate the efforts or the whatever the changes which we need to make. So that comes under interpretation of the data after plotting. So after, in the post processing, the plotting and interpretation is really needed. Without that, there's no meaning of doing CFD. So this is the just a diagram which is representing the process that you have a fluid problem or any problem. In order to understand the physics of the fluid, you need to solve Navier-Stokes equation. For solving Navier-Stokes equation, we have discretized form of the equation, which we apply over a grid, and then we do certain simulations or certain codes which are run on the computer, and then there are certain simulation results, and again this cycle keeps on going. Once you have simulation result, you might be seeing some changes, you might be doing certain modifications. So do the modification and it again goes here till the point this fluid problem is resolved to the desired extent. Starting with grids, I have told you that during initial thing, few slides back, that there are certain grids. The complete domain is broken down into the grids. So when we talk of grids, there are different types of grid, have their own advantages, their own disadvantages, their own applications. But the basic and even all these are not completely covered. There are many day by day as that we are evolving, as we are developing in the area of CFD. Still more number of grids are coming, but still the basic classification is there are Cartesian grid. What you know is just Cartesian grid. Then there are structured grid, unstructured grid. Very soon, like in next slide, I'll be showing it. And there are hybrid grids. So further, there are many classification: monoblock, multi-block, different types of shapes are there of the grids. So there are different ways of classifying the grids. Coming to the structured grid means the neighbors are well defined. If I take one of this element and when here you can see blocks are there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can see that there is a difference in the height of each block, or let's say the width of the each block. So there are different applications. The reason of this, I'll come to that. First of all, let me tell you what is a structured grid. What you can see here is in each block, maybe the height and width are varying, but each one of them are having one immediate neighbor. So if I talk of a cell, I'm talking this small block as a cell. So if I talk of cell of block number 5, it will have a neighbor from 4, which you can define. If you follow certain indices, let's say this is J and this is I varies from 0, 1, 2, 3, and it goes to the domain. J varies here, 0, 1, 2, 3, it goes. So if we follow certain indices, these are ij, numbering are called indices. So if we follow certain indices, there will be a definite neighbor of 4, 5 into 4, a definite neighbor of cell of 4 to 3, 3 to 2, 2 to 1. So you have certain fixed structure. Even if these grids are not Cartesian, even these shape changes, even in that case, the neighbors are defined. So this type of grid is known as structured grid. The reason for what it was telling few minutes back, the reason for having these different types of grid, like this width is different, this height is different, is when we solve the equation, when we solve Navier-Stokes equation, then there are certain areas where the physics is intense. Let us say, if I take example, we can consider it as a cylinder. Okay, it's a 2D animation, so we are seeing from the side. This is a cylinder, or you can consider it as a circle, and the fluid flow is happening over it like this. Okay, so in that case, the flow, the disturbance in the flow, the changes in the flow, the changes in the pressure will be more near to the surface where it is getting disturbed or distracted, or its direction is changing. Whereas if I go at a far distance from here, at this area or this area or this area, the flow is not that intense, or the physics is not that much involved. So wherever the flow is intense, wherever the physics is involved, in those locations we need a finer grid, more number of elements, because there the physics is changing very intensely. So we need more number of grids there. So the grids here is more refined, smaller as compared to here or here. And you can have a logic. Okay, in that case, give the fine grid to complete domain. But if we do so, we are needing to solve these equations. This grid might be just seem to be a design here, but when we go for our actual simulation, there are millions and billions of cells which we need to solve, and more number of cells mean more computational time, and more computational time means it is computationally more costly, which we don't want. So because of that, wherever the fine grids are not needed, we will not have it. Wherever it is needed, we should have it. So this is the example of structured grid. Coming on to the unstructured grid. Unstructured grid has its own advantages. Since I cannot go into more of details, so that's why I can just say that in a structured grid, you can't have regular indices ij. The neighbors will be defined. You will have a definite neighbor that for these cells are neighbor. Fine, but this information will be stored individually. You can't have that I is running in this direction or j is running in this direction. That type of structured continuity in ij or the numbering can't happen. So here each element information is stored and its neighbor is stored. So even unstructured grid have their own advantages as compared to structured grid. This is just an example where we can see a comparison between the different types of grid. Here you can see a regular pattern Cartesian type. Here it is unstructured. So just to give you a feel how the actual mesh can look like, and you can just imagine these elements, how many elements will be there, and if you start solving it, how much computationally intense it can be. This is just an example to show you a multi-block. Multi-block has definite advantage. What I told you just now, that neighbors will be defined, and multi-block another advantage is here you are having unstructured, and here you are having structured. The earlier multi-block diagram which I had shown you was more of a structured. Every block was structured, but multi-block does not mean that it cannot have a combination. It can have a combination of unstructured as well as structured grid. Okay. So this was about grid. Now coming to the boundary condition. Here I have just named different boundary conditions. They have their own equations. Okay, in terms of U, V, and P. Okay, where V is velocity in y direction, U is velocity in x direction, and P is the pressure. So whenever we are solving a domain in a domain, we of course need what is the velocity there and pressure there. The boundary conditions define, or they are the relation between the simulation and the practical case where the physics actually happens. What are boundary conditions? In order to explain them, here just I have named the boundary condition. In order to explain what do I mean by boundary condition, or what is meant by boundary condition, I'll just take few example. That can you consider the difference of swimming in a channel with respect to a river or with respect to sea? There is a definite difference. Okay, if a channel is there and if a person is swimming, similarly if a river is there and if a person is swimming, or for that matter if a sea is there infinite and a person is swimming here, then there will be an effect. The most common difference what I can say is, if the channel is there, then these channel walls will have effect, that it will try to affect the water which is flowing in the channel, and through that it will be affecting the swimmer, who is either swimming opposite to the direction of water or in the direction of water. If I compare this channel with river, the river width increases. So the effect of the banks of the river will not be that much pronounced over the swimming of this swimmer. Whereas if we come to the sea, then it is a further larger expanded area. So then the thing which is happening over the shore will not affect hardly the swimmer who is swimming in the sea. Local effects might be there. There might be a low pressure here, so there might be tides here. Those things might be there, but it hardly cares about what is happening in the shore. So this is just an example of uh, different types of swimming. Okay, or for that matter, if you are in a tunnel, if you are in a ground, or if you are just standing in the balcony, then the feel of the air which is flowing past you, it will be different. In tunnel it will be different, in the ground it will be different, and of course in the balcony it is different. But what is the reason of this difference of feeling? It's majorly the effect. Like when you're standing in a tunnel, it is a restricted passage, so complete air is coming and it is going through restricted passage, so effect is different. Whereas in ground it's more of open, so there are no boundaries to surround you, so the effect will be different. Or for that matter, this is a very common experience which you might have had. Suppose you are riding in a bike, or even if you are walking, and suddenly a truck passes from your side. So you can feel the effect, or even you can feel the push because of the passage of the truck. Whereas instead of truck, if a bike or a car passes from your side, the effect will be different. So these are the things which want you to feel, to see the effect of the boundary condition, how the boundary is there and what are the conditions which are putting. And because of this, the boundary conditions become important. The reason is, if you are doing certain experiment, if you are standing in a room or a tunnel and the air is passing, automatically the effect will be there. Automatically the physics will be involved, because the walls will be there to take care of the physics. But whereas when you do the simulation, you are actually putting these conditions over the boundaries. So by changing these boundary conditions, by changing these equations which you apply in boundary condition, it might be a physical feel that you are standing in a tunnel and suddenly by changing the equation, this complete wall is gone because you have changed the boundary condition on this wall, whereas related to this wall. So the boundary condition applications are very important because while simulating, there might be a situation that if you do a certain simulation, if you change the thing, you might have a case where you are simulating flow swimming a swimmer swimming in a sea, and suddenly you change the boundary condition. It feels that here is a tunnel, sorry, channel, and the swimmer is swimming here, and here it is sea, which is practically not possible. So the application of boundary condition is very important to simulate the thing which is happening physically. If you are not putting boundary conditions properly, then I'm sorry, but you will be getting very vague results which are not physically possible. Then coming to the next thing was, initially it was grid, then it was boundary condition, and now discrete solution. So this is what I was telling you, that if you want to solve the equation for this domain or this area, then we discretize it in terms of different points, or for that matter, you can consider it as different control volumes or different cells. And in each of these points or cells, we solve the discretized equation. So what do we mean by discretization is, the equation, the Navier-Stokes equation is a continuous equation. So ideally, if someday we are able to find out the analytical solution of Navier-Stokes equation, then you pick a point and you can know the values. Okay, whereas the difference between a continuous and this discrete solution is, here we'll be finding the solutions or the values at discrete points, and if we want at some other point, we need to average out the values of the neighbor. The disadvantage of this discretization is, discretization, I can say it's a necessary evil. If you want to solve Navier-Stokes equation, you need to discretize the equation. But the disadvantage is, it will not be continuous. You'll be having definite values at definite points, but intermediately you need to find out the average. If you want your solutions to be more accurate, these number of elements or different number of cells should be maximum possible to the extent you can have, till the point you can afford. You might think that why not take infinite number of points or more number of points, but again it becomes computationally expensive, which we can't afford. Afford does not means always financially. If you talk of commercial applications, all these industries, when they go for simulation, they will not allow you to do certain modification. They will not allow you to do research for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. They want immediate results. So if you have certain problem, and even if you are giving some solution which is giving you a betterment of 10 to 15%, the solution is good enough. So because of this, we can't have more number of cells. We need to do it in certain time frame, and if you want to control the time frame or the amount of time in which you are solving these equations, you need to have decent number of grid points rather than infinite. The next thing was convergence. I had talked with you or discussed with you regarding myths. First was CFDs, ANSYS. No, ANSYS is a tool. Okay, like that. Here, when I'm talking about this convergence, there are different types of convergence. First is domain. By domain, I mean to say, when we do the simulation, we consider certain domain around the simulation. If I want to simulate anything like an object here, then I will take certain area, and in this area I will have grids and I will simulate. So when I'm considering this domain size, let's say this is capital Y, and this object size, let's say small y, then this y as compared to capital Y, or this small x with respect to x, that I mean to say the dimension of the object with respect to dimension of the domain, it will affect the results or the accuracy of the result which you are getting towards the end. So there is a study called domain independence study. What is done in domain independence study is, let's say you take a certain domain, do the simulation, check any result. Let's say certain object, coefficient of drag. Okay, so you take this object, take a domain, calculate coefficient of drag. Now let's say increase the domain. Let's say double the domain, keeping the grid size same. You increase the domain, again check the value of CD. It will definitely change. But you see what is the variation of change. If this variation is less than 5%, you can take the domain. But if this variation is more, then you have to take the bigger domain. Then further increase the domain till the point the accuracy of result is coming. That moment you get the accuracy of result, that is known as domain independence. And before starting and doing lot many simulations, we need to do one domain independence study. This is first thing. Second thing is grid independence. By grid independence, I mean if you vary the number of grids, if you increase or decrease, your results will change. So initially, before going for simulation, keep on increasing the number of grids. Let's say you take initially 100 grids, check certain parameter. Then you increase it, let's say double it, let's say 200, 400, 800. Keep on doing, keep on increasing the grids till you get the variation of certain parameter within the desirable limits. If you get it, then it is grid independence. And the third is time step. For time step, you are, even if you are doing certain transient simulation or non-transient simulation, static thing, whatever you are doing, the results vary with time. When we do the simulation, there are certain time steps which we do, or there is certain time step, pseudo time step, which we have in simulations. So this pseudo time step will have effect on accuracy. The smaller is the time step, you might get more accurate results. So even for time step, keep on reducing the time step and keep on checking the change in the value of certain definite parameter, and you take the least time step when the accuracy or the variation is within the desirable limits. So before going for detailed study, detailed simulation, and this is something what most of the students, most of the people who are trying CFD casually don't do, before doing anything, especially researchers. If some of you are involved in PhD or something, whatever, then before going through thorough simulations and all, make the domain independence study, do the grid independence study, and also the time step independence study. Once you are done with that, take that domain, take that grid, take the time step, and then you can uh, do the research or whatever you want to. Coming on to the next part, interpretation. So by interpretation, I mean to say, if I show you this figure, okay, you might think very good figure, certain colors are there, certain values are there, fine. Even this figure seems to be good, very nice figure. You will appreciate the person who has done this, even for that matter this, or for that matter this. But just by showing this figure, if I want to know, if I'm showing this to a layman can ask, who is not belonging to the area or who doesn't have understanding, that what is this color, what is this color, what should I understand, what should I take from it. So we don't have anything. Or the same person says that, okay, don't do this, just do the simulation of this thing. Okay, so the colors will of course change, but how does that change of color matter to that person? In that case, you need to define that what is this, if this is velocity, what is blue, what is red, you need to make him understand. And if we change these values, if I change the design, then how these values will change, and what is the effect of it. If a car is being driven, and if the pressure at the rear end of the car is more, and in the front side if the pressure is less, then what is the physical significance of it? So we need to interpret the data rather than just plotting or having some colorful figure. And similarly, the same case applies with here, that if I'm doing certain electronic cooling and if the temperature is there, then where, in what area do I want the temperature to be the less? As per one study, for every some 10-degree rise of temperature, the probability of failure of that electronic component increases by a certain large percentage. In electronic components, most of the failure happen because of the thermal stresses, not because of the other structural stresses. Okay, so even here, the interpretation and the changes, the understanding of that becomes important. For that matter, even boundary layer, most of you are aware of boundary layer, so I'm not going into that. And even here, when we are plotting for certain Reynolds number, this is again the case which I had told you, that flow across a cylinder. So if there are certain vorticities or there are certain velocity, then what's the importance of this vorticity? Even for some of you who are not aware of vorticity, you can think that these are just certain circles which are being represented. But one very important thing here is there is one vortex called reverse von Karman vortex. If I have reverse von Karman vortex, by that I mean that the structure which is produced here, it is coming in this direction, and the which is produced here, it is going in that direction. If they are changing the direction, then this is known as reverse von Karman vortex street. And when we have this, we have the push in forward direction. So that makes the flow easy for the body. So for that matter, I'm just giving an example that just by having these colorful figures, it might not be of use till the point we really have a interpretation of it or understanding of the physics. So these were the few things which I wanted to share with you. Uh, I might not have gone technically too much into depth because 1.5 hour might not be enough. This is like a complete sea to understand. But this is what I wanted to share on my end. And at last, I would like to thank the management of the Shankaracharya group, the coordinators, and my management, and lastly, the participants, because you are the ones because of whom I was there. Otherwise, I am not needed. Thank you all, and I am open for the any doubts or questions.
Thank you so much, sir. I would request the participants to please ask their queries in the chat box. We have a question from Kishore Kumar Sahu, sir. He asks, what is FEM, FDM, and FVM?
These three are three different methods. First of all, FEM is finite element, FDM is finite difference, and FEM is finite volume method. The basic difference in these three methods is how we discretize the equation. I've shown a set of equation which is known as Navier-Stokes equation. When we discretize it numerically and we solve this over the domain, then there are certain methods. Like in FDM, we apply the directly finite difference equations over these small elements and we solve them for different values. Whereas in FEM and FEM, finite element and finite volume, where we are having different cells over which we solve the equation, and especially FVM, finite volume method, which is very close to me because I have used it. In finite volume method, what we do is we do the apply the conservation equation. Like if I tell you, you might be knowing conservation of mass and conservation of energy. So if I am having a single cell, the amount of any fluid or any energy which is coming into the cell, if it is at a steady state, then it will be steady. It will not change. So whatever amount is coming in, we apply conservation of equation of mass and conservation of energy, and we solve the equation. So basically, we do the things, discretize the equation, we apply it. But when we apply the basic application, the method in which we apply, based on that, this FEM, FDM, and FEM vary. And one important thing is we can't say that one method is more like or better than the other method. There are various discrete applications area in which one of these will be better suited for the application. I hope he'll be happy with the answer.
पूछूं? Hello. Good afternoon,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah, Pulkit sir, tell.
Sir, actually, what is the basic or minimum PC requirement for simulation of fluid
Uh,
CFD, sir?
if look, first of all, one very common mistake which people do is a laptop is not good enough for simulations. The reason is whatever higher configuration you take, the amount of computation load which is generated, I would suggest that for initial for learning purpose, laptop is might be good enough. But once you go for simulation, preferably you should have a desktop. And for
Okay, sir.
a decent amount of simulation, a basic simulation, I think 16 GB RAM and even a i5 processor will be good enough. But you have to take care that when you're running the simulation, the room in which it is kept or the area in which it is kept, it should have a decent like 25 degree or 24 degree centigrade temperature, so that it doesn't affect the working of the desktop.
Thank you so much, sir.
Sir, there is one question from Prabhjot Singh, sir.
Yeah.
He asks, he kindly recommends some books for learning CFD and FEM.
Look, there are books, a lot of books. What to start with this? There's a book by Patankar. Okay, that's a very good book to start with if you're talking about starting. Then Anderson is there. Depending on the method, FEM. Unfortunately, I have not worked in much in that area, so I can't tell it right at the moment. But you can share my number or maybe email ID, and I will get back to him. I'll definitely share the good books, few good books on FEM with him.
Hello. Good
Yeah,
afternoon,
Harish
sir.
sir,
This,
how are
this is
you?
Harish. Thank you. Yeah, I'm good, sir. Thank you, and sir, thank you for the the lecture. Sir, I want to ask that what is the proficiency of CFD over the experimental analysis?
CFD over experimental. Look, uh, experimental versus CFD. It's a very difficult question to answer because I would like to narrate one incident. There's one professor, very respected professor, Professor Gaitonde in IIT Bombay.
Yes.
So when I was doing PhD, I was doing the numerical study, and he was in my RPC committee, Research Progress Committee. So he's such a person. The first question which he asks is where our thinking ends, his question starts. That type of
Yes, sir.
understanding he has. So
Yes, yes.
simulations are definitely good, but when I was supporting the simulation CFD part, he just took a water bottle and just moved it, and he said
Yes.
that can you simulate this flow which is happening inside the bottle. So there are limitations even for the numerical analysis. So I
Okay. So
agree to that point that CFD can't suffice at every point. But like I took one example of aeroplane. So if you are designing an aeroplane, then you can't change design every time and do the experimental study to check the optimum design. So in
yes,
such
sir.
area, CFD will be very helpful. So
Yes, sir.
I will say that it should go hand in hand. Initially, when you are designing anything, starting with anything, you go with simulation, get to an optimized solution, and then go for the experimental study. This is one thing. Second thing, I have been in Raipur. I have worked there in some of the organization, and even I am working in Hyderabad. Sometimes experimental studies pose a constraint which is in terms of financial constraints.
Yes, yes.
Especially I think most of us are working in private colleges, so we do are in need of funding and all. Sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't get it. So even in such cases, simulation can be a good thing because you need a good system and a software you can do. So I cannot select one of these two. They both go hand in hand.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can have better idea about result by CFD, right? We can have better idea about the result before doing it experimentally.
Yeah, you can say so.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And yes, for its destructive experimental and the use that you have given the example of aeroplane, so definitely the CFD will be better in that case,
Of
right?
course, for initial designing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Hello, Dr. Mukul sir. Good afternoon. This is Hitesh.
Yeah, Hitesh.
Sir, thank you very much for such a very nice and informative session, sir. And after your lecture, I came to know that there is a difference between ANSYS and CFD. Actually, I had a huge difference that I thought that ANSYS is a CFD. But after your lecture, I know, sir, that ANSYS is only the tool to understand or to get the knowledge about the CFD. Sir, your session was extremely very nice, sir. You have explained, told about the very practical examples of flying object and swimming and how the cyclists will involve CFD analysis to that process. Extremely very thankful, sir. We are very thankful.
No, in fact, Hitesh, I thank you because it was Hitesh and Dr. Mayank because of whom I could get a chance to come here. And it was really nice feeling because I can see some of the known faces. I can see Dr. Deveshri also here. I can see Disha if she's Disha Devangan from Bilaspur. I can see Harish. So it was like going back to the time when I was working with these people. So it was a really nice feeling. And coming back to
Yes, sir.
Shankaracharya is
Yes.
always a nice feeling because I have my work experience with Shankaracharya, and still I remember those days. So
I
it
think
was good.
I'm also I also was associated with you from 2016, sir.
Yeah, definitely.
Hello,
It,
sir.
it,
Sir,
it's nice to have you here, sir. Once again, it's nice to listen you. It was a very thankful
uh,
moment for us.
Mukul, sir, I have one question.
Yeah, Hitesh.
Sir, is there any online platform from where we can learn CFD or FEM, ANSYS, etc.?
Uh, Look, basically these days, if you go to YouTube and online, there are a lot many things. One serious thing about YouTube is YouTube can be good and it is risky also because any people these days who whatever he feels they are putting it in YouTube. So sometimes they put it wrongly. One good site which I've seen is Skill Link. I have not experienced it, but seeing the site and the kind of syllabus which they have it seems to be good. So that might be one of the good areas. And even one of the thing is open form. Like IT Bombay is having one FOSI program which supports open sources and open sources are free. So open form is also a good option to go for.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
I think Disha was saying something. If she's the one, I'm sorry if some other Disha is
Hello,
then.
sir.
Sorry, ma'am.
Hello, sir. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, Disha.
The presentation was very good, sir.
Thank you.
So you were mentioning about the IIT Bombay, sir. One thing I would like to add, sir, Atul sir is having a separate channel in the YouTube for the CFD, sir, beginners for the CFD.
Yeah, for others information, Dr. Atul Sharma sir,
Yes, sir, Atul
he's
sir.
my guide,
Yes, sir, your
PhD
guide,
guide.
sir.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sir.
Dear participants, if you have any more doubts, please type your queries in the chat box. We will be closing the chat box soon. Okay, so moving forward, thank you so much, sir, for joining and sharing your experience and knowledge with us. It was a great session, sir, and I wish every participant to take back valuable lessons with them. Thank you so much, sir, for connecting with us today, and I wish you a great day ahead.
Thank you all. It was nice time here.
Thank
Sir,
you very
I
much,
would,
sir.
sir, I would
Yeah,
like to
some
request you one thing, sir. If you
yeah,
can share the presentation so that we may share it with our participants, it would be
fine,
great.
fine. I'll share it.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thank you all.
Dear participants, we will connect again at 2:30 p.m. sharp for the third session of the day. Thank you.